Good afternoon. Today is May 2nd, 2016, and this is the Glendale Water and Power Commission. Madam Clerk, if you would, please call the roll.
President Hale.
Present.
Commissioner Camargo.
Present.
Commissioner Avanesian.
Present.
Commissioner Chan.
Present.
And Commissioner Law.
Present.
Members, that actually brings us to item number 2 on our agenda, which is the consent items. Does anyone have any amendments to the minutes? I have none, so seeing none, we will approve that without objection.
Okay. 3 is GWP Commission staff comments.
Members, any comments from commissioners? Seeing none, Mr. Zern, can I ask if you have any comments?
I have no comments.
Okay. We'll go on to the next item then.
Okay. 4A is update on Aliso Canyon and potential impact from Michael Webster, LA-DWP.
Mr. Webster, welcome.
Thank you. It's nice to see a lot of friends up here I've worked with for many, many years. My name is Mike Webster, and I am Executive Director of the Power System at LA-DWP. And so I am today going to represent a group of agencies. They would be here if they could, but I will do my best to represent the entire group as we talk about the impacts on Aliso Canyon. And so the agencies that are involved in this process, and I will just note that the Department of Gas and Geothermal Resources, they're not actually involved in the technical study or the action plan that was developed, but they have a very important role as far as ensuring the safety of the Aliso gas storage facility itself. We'll talk a little bit about them later. And 4 agencies were involved in getting together to determine what the impact on electrical reliability could be should Aliso Canyon storage not be in place for this summer. And those agencies are the California Public Utility Commission, the California Energy Commission, and 2 balancing authorities, the CalISO Balancing Authority and LA-DWP as a balancing authority. Glendale Water and Power is part of our balancing authority in the city of LA, as well as Burbank Water and Power.
So, Mike, I want to stop you real quick because I want to put a little bit of context into the report, just for those that aren't kind of living in this world. In the Los Angeles neighborhood of Porter Ranch, one of the largest regional gas storage facilities in our area sprung a leak at one of the gas wells, and nearly the entire storage was depleted before they were able to close that leaking well. So what we are now dealing with in the aftermath of that, and this made sort of national and international headlines because a massive amount of methane gas was released into the atmosphere, which is even higher global warming potential than CO2. So what we're dealing with here is the aftermath of that gas leak, the future of that storage facility, and what it means in the short term for electrical energy production in our region. So I just wanted to put a little bit of context to this discussion for any members of the public that might be interested in the backstory there.
Thank you. I think that's an excellent summary, and that's what on page 3 I wanted to point out, that Aliso Canyon represents 60% of the storage capability of Southern California Gas Company. And while LA-DWP, we do not use Aliso Canyon ourselves. We do not buy gas from the gas company. We buy our own gas from the wholesale markets. We have firm transport that brings it into the system. The gas company, as a system operator, they use Aliso Canyon as a giant shock absorber to meet the operational needs to supply all of their customers, not only their firm core customers, but their non-firm, non-core customers, of which electric utilities, we are all non-core, non-firm customers of the gas company. And so that well was shut down by governor's order until all 114 wells are checked. Now, this is the responsibility of Dogger, who I mentioned earlier, is that there can be no additional injections into that storage until all 114. And my understanding, each well has to go through 6 tests to pass through that gauntlet to be proven safe so Aliso can potentially come back into service. We don't know when all 114 wells will be checked. And this is under the jurisdiction of Dogger, so all we can do is hope that they're going through that process as rapidly as possible. And we've been encouraging gas company through public testimony to move rapidly and safely so that we're in a position that we can make use of, they can make use of Aliso to supply our gas needs in the future. Now, the study that we embarked on is we said, what if Aliso Canyon was not available this summer? What would that or could that mean to electric utilities? So this is a summer-only study. Winter study is starting that process, and there will be a workshop in July or August to determine what impacts that we could have in the winter. And so 2 studies were done. The first one was a technical study. Now, what this was a pressure study that looked at real-time flows within the system. So they were looking at pressure analysis to make sure that the pressure stayed high enough so that it didn't get into a situation where the pressures dropped, pilot flights started to go out, which really creates a very great concern within gas company to have many pilots out, have them to go back and relight those pilots. And there's also safety concerns as gas pressures come up with pilots that may not be working properly. So from their perspective, keeping the pressure at minimum levels for core customers is critical. So they did a very detailed pressure analysis. Once that was done, and we'll talk about what we found in that technical study, an action plan was developed as what could we do as electric utilities to help mitigate some of the potential risks. So Aliso supports about 10,000 megawatts in Southern California. So there's 17 power plants within that circle where Aliso is being used on a semi-regular basis to supply the pressure needs within that circle. Some of those are Glendale Water and Power facilities, as well, whether it's facilities you own or facilities that you're part of. LADWP has 4 generating stations within that circle. Now, it's important to realize that the impact of any gas curtailment is not contained within that circle. So should there be situations where there's gas interruptions, the outages could spread throughout entire Southern California area. It could be in Riverside County, it could be in Imperial County, Orange County, LA County, etc. So this reach is quite widespread. And so we talked about how do they use this storage to meet our needs. Is that when there is an imbalance between the flowing gas and the demand of gas, that is when they have an imbalance where they have to use this shock absorber to either pull gas out of the shock absorber to meet our needs, or if they have too much gas, they put it into storage, and the shock absorber takes that extra gas. And so that's important if we can figure out how to make sure that flowing gas, the schedule and actual gas usage is matched. The other things that can really impact the ability of their ability to meet our generating needs is if there's a contingency. So if there's a transmission contingency, typically we'll go to fast ramping gas turbines. So we'll rely on those, but if there's no gas available, we will not be able to recover from contingencies. Also, they use this shock absorber to follow renewables. So as solar is starting to come up in the afternoon and our gas is ramping up rapidly, they're using that to balance out their gas flows. Now you have to remember that electricity flows at 186,000 miles an hour, and gas is flowing at 30 miles an hour. So what's happening is, as demands are changing on the electric grid and our gas units are starting to ramp to meet that second by second requirement, the gas can't get to the generators fast enough, which is why they need to maintain a lot of pressure so that they can meet those ramps. So, in the study, in this pressure analysis, they found that on an average day, so this is an average summer, and they looked at 4 critical days during that summer, and they did this pressure modeling. In that modeling, they found that there were 16 days the gas company is likely to curtail gas. Of those 16 days, 14 days were deep enough to possibly require electric interruptions for those 14 days. And it's for hours during those days. It's not all day long. It's for hours during those days. And so the key risks that were identified is that the mismatch between schedule and flowing gas, and there's some mitigation measures that we're going to talk about on how they can make that a little bit better. The mismatch, if there's also outages in the gas company system, that makes things worse. So if there's a storage pump station that's out, or a compressor station that's out, or if they have pipelines that are out of service, that makes the situation worse. And also, if there's a mismatch with all of those together, with an electric outage, a transmission outage that we're relying on, all those factors considered can make the 14 days greater. Now, we can't predict if it's going to be 14 days. It could be a cool summer and everything is held in balance and there's only 0 days of outages. It could be worse depending on the contingencies, for example, fires that may occur underneath the transmission lines. So we've identified a list of 18 measures, and there's more measures than this, but these are the ones that we'd like to talk about. The first set of measures is what could we do with Aliso Canyon before it's approved for injecting. There's currently 15 BCF of storage in Aliso, and they can go down to about 5 BCF. So the question is will Dogger and will the state allow the release of some of that storage for the use of electric utilities during an outage, a potential electric outage, to help mitigate a potential electric outage? And so that's a policy question that needs to be addressed to determine if some of that's going to be available. After all the wells are complete, then the analysis will be, will they allow Aliso to be used and where they can start injecting gas again and build up the storage to meet the needs not only of the remainder of the summer but also next winter. Those are things we don't know until Dogger gets done with their analysis. In the section of tariff changes, what this is about what can they do to help balance daily gas from schedule to actual. Today, because they built their system over the last 30 years to meet the utilities needs, we have monthly balancing. But can we go to daily balancing? And is that going to be effective? Now, for those in the utility industry, we know that it's only as good as our ability to predict the weather. Because we know that in the summer, things can get quite volatile, and you think you know what you're going to burn tomorrow, and the weather's much, much hotter or much, much cooler. And so that's going to be one of the challenges of daily gas balancing. It's not a panacea to solve the problem. It helps mitigate some of the problems. How they're going to use operational flow orders, et cetera. All of these things are sort of tariff-related changes that they're looking at making right now. What we've seen is unprecedented coordination between the CAISO, LADWP, CPUC, and CEC, as well as the gas company, to determine if we can get early actionable information, then we can start configuring our systems differently. So as we all get that information, maybe we can purchase more from the outside markets, maybe we could ramp generation externally and not use as much in-basin gas. Those are the types of things that with early actionable information, we can do different things to our systems. And then lastly is what can we do to reduce the level of natural gas on the system. So these are the things that, like deploying additional energy efficiency. So for LADWP, we're trying to deploy much more targeted energy efficiency this summer. We're going to spend $178 million, and we're trying to target it for the summer months, especially during the peak hours, so that again, it helps mitigate the need for using generation. We're also trying to ramp up our demand response programs. We're trying to ramp up our energy efficiency programs. Our battery storage programs, so that we have more battery storage moving forward. Now, for LADWP, it's not on this slide, but I'll talk about it a little bit. What we plan to do is we plan to stop making wholesale energy sales, because what we want to do is not put more demands on our gas fleet, because we want to keep our gas fleet for our native load customers. That's really important. The other thing that we're doing is we're not hedging physically as much. So instead of buying summer gas and planning on burning that, we're holding off buying summer gas, hoping some of these mitigation measures help reduce the amount of gas that we need. So we'll be doing more daily gas purchases, which are important. And the other thing that we're doing is we have tremendous flexibility in our system, and I'm not sure if you have the same level of flexibility in Glendale, but we're going to start operating our system potentially in a non-economic manner so that we have more flexibility to respond to a potential gas curtailment should it occur. So you have to remember the scope and size of what we're talking about. There's 10,000 megawatts that are impacted by this if there's a gas curtailment. And so the mitigation measures, they are certainly helpful. They get us on the right track. But this is an operational issue that with early actionable information, we may be able to respond. But there's the possibility, when you look at 14 days, that we will not be able to meet all of our customers' demands. And so that means to us is that if we get to the point and we've exercised every single option out there, we've purchased, we've reconfigured our system, in order to protect the western United States, we're required by NERC to start curtailing our customers in very short strategic areas, and you do the rotating blackouts across the city of Los Angeles. But this might be occurring within the Cal ISO and across their customers and spread, like I said, to San Diego, and Imperial, and Riverside. They may also be required to do rotating blackouts to take the short-term outage to protect a widespread cascading outage that could then spread across all of our systems and across the United States. And so I was invited here to kind of talk to you a little bit about the study, give you a very high-level view, but I can answer any questions that you would like.
Mr. Webster, as you went through the mitigation measures that you're contemplating, it strikes me that some of these are within your control or within the control of customers, and others are not. First category of prudent use of Aliso Canyon seems like maybe it's the latter, that is not entirely within your control. What would that require, especially if the inspections of the 114 wells is not complete at that time?
Yeah, so the return of Aliso is completely out of our control, and it is in the hands of Dogger, as well as the state agencies, specifically the PUC, to make a determination. Is the 114 wells, have they been checked? Have they been, approved to be safely returned to service or closed out from service? And what is our policy position? Are we going to allow Aliso to be used in two ways? Draw down on some of that 15 BCF that's already there to help mitigate electric outages, or are we going to be allowed to re-inject at some point in time? We don't know the answer, and we don't know the pacing of their checking out the 114 wells. Now, I will tell you that publicly, Dogger has put a web page together with all 114 wells, and they're putting an assessment of the status of each well on their web page. So the public can go to Dogger and see that information to determine how quickly they're re-inspecting and putting those back in service.
I do, but go ahead.
Please explain, I want to understand, all these wells are subject to same deficiency, or some of them are good, some of them bad, and what is the pressure? I mean, all of them may leak at same pressure?
Well, that's a great question for the gas company and Dogger. As LA Water and Power, we are impacted by what's happening, but we are not involved in any of the inspections or how this well operates. But we do know there's 114, and each well has to go through an inspection. And the ones that they can repair and put into service, they're going to do that. And the ones that they decide they're not going to repair, they actually have to close each of those wells up so that when all is said and done, Dogger will determine if that well field is safe. So in our analysis, we assumed that Aliso was not going to be available to support the electric utilities needs. We felt that was an appropriate risk management measure to look at that situation and what we could do about it in advance.
Yes, one more question from my perspective. So clearly it seems to me that safety is the most important component here. But also, as you talk about transitioning from broader pricing to purchasing perhaps on a daily basis, do you have an image of what that would mean from a cost perspective?
Well, we expect that it's going to cost us a bit more this summer. We're going to be compiling at DWP our costs for use down the road. We believe that the gas company has put us in this position not to any actions of our own. They have supplied us for 30 years. They have worked with us as we projected additional gas usage and gas ramping. We have been partners. And so we find ourselves today where we're impacted by this. So we're going to collect our costs, and we'll see how we can use those costs down the road. But this operational flexibility and taking more and more to the short-term market and not making wholesale sales, I believe, could have a cost impact on LED WP.
Thank you.
Mr. Webster, when you said that you would be operating in a non-economic manner, is that what you meant? Is that what that referred to?
Yeah, so because we have the ability to move generation throughout our system, we can decide to move, quite frankly, coal plants are more expensive today than natural gas. So I can raise our generation at a coal plant and reduce our natural gas generation in basin if that's helpful. That's a cost. Mm-hmm. So that's what I mean by operating in a little different fashion to give us maximum flexibility.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Chen.
Yeah, I also have a question. Good to see you, Mike.
Good to see you.
Thank you for that presentation. And I know GWP is a member of the LADWP Balancing Authority. So what's our role? What's the Glendale Water and Power's role at this point?
So,
and moving forward.
So I explain things from LADWP's perspective,
mm-hmm.
and we are hoping that the other utilities that have not been part of the study are reviewing that study and start to think about it in the same way. Because if there's a gas curtailment and is pro rata shared, LADWP will get its curtailment, but Glendale Water and Power will get its gas curtailment as well. Mm-hmm. So what I was describing as mitigation measures is those are things that you might want to think about as well. Are there energy efficiency measures that can get in before the summer, or demand response measures? Is there flexibility in your system? And to start thinking about some of the same types of things that we're thinking about. Mm-hmm. Now, you're in our balancing authority, so ultimately we're going to be working together in very tight communications. Mm-hmm. We don't curtail gas to Glendale Water and Power. It's not us. So that's going to come directly from the gas company. So our responsibility is to communicate as we get our curtailment and you get your curtailment, what is that going to mean as far as your ability to balance generation and load? And of course, if we can supply our needs and the needs of others, we are all going to work together to do that. But when it gets to a point where we're in a curtailment situation, chances are that Glendale Water and Power could be in a similar situation. Now, if you're perfectly balanced because you've done everything you need, it could just affect LADWP. Chances are it's going to impact us all in about the same way is what I would plan for.
Yes, it will.
Okay.
How's that? Just so you have the answer.
Right.
It will.
Right. And I'm curious, how much work have we done so far?
A tremendous amount of work, Ms. Chen.
And,
yes.
and what is what's
all of the
plan?
same things that Mr. Webster refers to are many of the things that we're looking at, all the way down to going over our rolling blackout plan. So we're prepared from best case to worst case scenario. We don't have the same luxury that LA does in having multiple facilities, but of course they have a much bigger clientele than we do as well. We're worried about the transmission capacity and our ability to bring it in from other places because we don't have a significant amount of transmission capacity, and it will be pretty overloaded at times as folks go to other places to look for this. We don't do, at least today, we aren't in the same type of a situation with regards to hedging gas and some of our gas responsibility. We're much more dependent on, in fact, fully dependent, with a few exceptions, on Southern California gas. But we still have some of the very same concerns Mr. Webster mentions, not the least of which is the tariffs and those impacts on us and our customers as a result of something that was completely and utterly out of our control. All the way down to recently, about a week ago, I believe it was, the California Energy Commission asked for comments on the very 18-point action plan that Mr. Webster was referring to, and we did submit our thoughts on that, talking about, again, health and safety being the utmost concern of everyone involved. But as you go through this inspection, some modicum of reasonableness that we want to inject in there. Our understanding is about a third of the wells have been inspected so far.
We've heard rumors of that. It's not official.
And we have had a presentation by the gas company as well. They came into us to talk to us, and they're very hopeful, but much of it is the same message that you're getting from them. And throughout the work that Mike and the other representatives of the other three agencies, the gas company's been there with them to provide them that critical input that they need. Of course, the gas company is not a member of this group because, as you know, the gas company's under investigation, at least within two divisions of the CPUC for what transpired. But their knowledge and their knowledge of their systems is critical. So they've been involved to the point of trying to look at options. So we've spoken to them. They would love for us to continue to support any measure that helps them get some of these gas wells back online. And again, if that's possible, we would support that as long as the health, safety, and welfare of the citizens of the city of Los Angeles are first and foremost taken care of. If that can't be assured, then we'll have to do what we need to do in other places. But
so where are we now? Are we like the back seat watching, or are we actively coming up with programs and actually rolling out programs? In a very short time. It's
a very short time, and we don't have the level of programs that we would need to manage this type of thing. So as we go on future-wise, these are things that we're looking at as modernization efforts to the utility. But when you get caught by something like this so quickly, and it's so substantial in its impact to us, and I don't know that any of the folks in the industry realize just quite how much gas this field, storage that this field had, or how much importance it was to the rest of the area outside of winter. I think a lot of people figured this was winter storage. And that's traditionally when the gas company uses most of their product. I think it's probably 2/3 more during the winter. Then we began to find out that no, it also impacts the summer. So a lot more information came to fruition that had us scrambling. And, we're a smaller utility that doesn't have a lot of the things that we're on our way to doing some of those, but, instantaneous reaction is not easy. And we've got an aging power plant that you all know. So even on its best day, Grayson has some issues. We also have Magnolia as another opportunity, and certainly working through the LADWP Balancing Authority to find what other options we have. So we're looking and doing all we can. We got our conservation people working. We get the message out to people that, in the event that this is a hot summer, let's see what we can do. We're going out and reaching out to big users to see if there's some things that they might be able to do to help alleviate the load. Because when it gets down to that curtailment and the lack of gas coming in, shedding load is what we'll have to do, and we'll have to try to do it where we have the least impact. But if we can get some of our bigger users to cooperate, so we're going out to the Disneys and the DreamWorks to talk to them and some of the other folks to see. But again, you also have the whole situation. We've got large users that are public safety issue concerns, and we can't really touch those. We've got to make sure that those are in play all the time. So this is certainly not an easy thing, especially given the short period of time we have to react. And I think the city of LA has done a great job. And again, their issues in many respects become our issues. So we've stayed very close and continue to stay close on this. And we're very appreciative of them, not only for coming here today, for Mike coming here today, but for the ongoing partnership we have in trying to deal with this. And if it's a hot summer, these are things, this is all about predicting. If we have a very, very hot summer, that's going to make things a little bit more difficult.
So, Mr. Zern, just assuming, as Mr. Webster suggests, completely you're not getting any gas, do we have any solution? Because LADWP will their priority would be for themselves. Right. So we will be always second priority if there is a solution there.
Well, I think that in all fairness, their obligation is to their ratepayers as ours is to ours. But to the effect that, decisions that they're making, we're going to have to think about those that we're able to make some similar decisions. But we can look for outside sources of power or look at our existing contractual obligations and see if we can increase the amount of non-gas into our system. But we're a much smaller utility, and our options aren't as great. And the transmission is limited.
And so two other points I wanted to make is, one, is we are in conversations with Peak, and Peak is the entity that is responsible for the reliability in the West, about are there ways to increase the import capability into the LA basin? And what types of things do we need to go through? So our grid operators, our chief dispatchers are working together with Peak to see if we can make that happen. The second thing is we are going to start a working group with Glendale and Burbank to talk about the communications. So at least within our balancing authority, we kind of do our own tabletop exercises and kind of think this through as, well, what if this happens? What do you do? What if this happens? So that we're a little bit more prepared as a group within the balancing authority. So we will be setting that up over the next couple of weeks to start working through those operational issues.
And at the staff level, lower staff level, there's been a lot of dialogue already between those three cities. So, and this is obviously something that's very much of concern to not just us, to many electric utilities in the area.
So, Mike, you touched on sort of the operational coordination that's happening in a way that hasn't before. And I just want to point out, you have 4 agencies whose logos rarely appear on the same document together. The PUC, the Energy Commission, LA, and the ISO. There's an old adage that says you never let a good crisis go to waste. How can we leverage this opportunity or the opportunity of this crisis to sort of make a better relationship across the board between all of these 4 entities, and what kind of thawing in those tense relationships are you already seeing, and what do you think are some of the potential dividends that we might realize moving forward?
So for those 4 entities, we worked on this starting in about February or March of this year. So what we've seen is an unprecedented level of communication. The gas companies started to share more information with us as far as how their systems work. The CEC with their expertise and the CPUC with their expertise, we have started to see this tremendous collaboration. Now, here's where it really plays out, is this collaboration becomes very important as we get into the summer, because what we're finding is the CPUC, they've already ordered the gas company to pay for Flex Alert campaigns, where we can put that energy conservation call out. So that's a positive action that they can take. They're also helping us think about how we could do additional demand response, and they may be available to work with Glendale. How do you do additional demand response, energy efficiency, other types of programs, so that we can see if we can deploy those types of programs this summer. And so this is one of the benefits. And LADWP as a balancing authority and CalISO are really working together on emergency operations. If we're in an emergency, CalISO, can you support us? And can you look at moving your system around to support the needs? And when I say us, it's really LADWP as a balancing authority, and maybe making energy available to all of our participating utilities in that balancing authority. So that level of communication is happening to make sure all the agreements are in place. We've also launched a campaign in the Desert Southwest, so I'm moving outside of that group, but how can we work more effectively with our major counterparties, SRP and APS and Pacific Corp and PG&E and others, to unleash emergency power to the Southern California region. So that will also help if we get that lined up in advance. And so we all benefit if we're successful in that.
There's this concept in the public safety world known as mutual aid, where if you call 911, the closest resource responds. So even if you're on the border of LA and Glendale, you might get an LA fire truck that comes, or ambulance that comes and responds. If we can have that kind of level of coordination and that level of collaboration between the agencies that are responsible for delivering power out of this, I think that that could have a long-term dividend far beyond this sort of immediate issue of the gas supply curtailment. So just a quick comment there. Commissioner Chan, did you have another question?
Yes, I do have a request, actually. It seems like where we're at in Glendale right now is a lot of brainstorming and looking at the different programs and options that we may have. I would like to request that when things are a little bit more firmed up, I'd like to, for this commission to have a report looking at like the actual impact that we may have in megawatt, and what are the programs that we're looking at, what are our options. And for instance, one example you mentioned was to go talk to our large customers and see if they'd be willing to be curtailed on those days. And like, for instance, what percentage, of that load would those customers be, et cetera. What I'm saying is I'm requesting to see a more of a concrete, detailed plan on paper when time comes.
We'll do the best we can. Again, I don't know that there's going to be any curtailment, or I don't know if there's going to be 25 days of curtailment, or 14 or 18. So we have different scenarios based on how much load we have to shed, and that has to go what the impacts will be. Those we can bring you. We have those, and we can talk about the different programs that we're involved in now. But a lot of it is speculative, so we'll do the best we can. Well, a lot of it is
speculative, but that's why there's this forecasting function. We have to be ready if it happens. So right now we're talking about 14, 16 days, so let's just assume 14, 16 days.
Right, we're ready. It's just, at the point of how severe will it get? I mean, it's easy. I can tell you exactly when the curtailment comes and what that impact's going to be.
Right, and maybe you can provide for us like 3 scenarios: the serious one, the mild one, or one that's like
not a problem,
moderate. Yeah, that would be great. I don't know if next month would be too late, or what do you think, President Hale?
Yeah, well, I think that if there's a willingness to do a special meeting in the shorter run than next month, then I think that might be appropriate, just given the nature of the circumstances. And it would be good to sort of lay this out before we actually start to see curtailments and blackouts and things like that, should they occur. That being said, I don't know when the summer months are projected to begin and when the hot days are coming. Although, like Mike said, it's predicting the weather, so it's we don't know.
And traditionally, as you know, the hottest part of the summer is towards the end of it. So you get
August.
Well, actually,
August.
September is usually the hot month, and sometimes the heat goes all the way into the first part of October these days. So we can. Why don't we send you something?
Okay.
So you have it via email.
In any event, I think once we get to the agenda forecast, we should put a little bit more detail on exactly what we're looking for from you, Mr. Zern, and then we'll figure out how to proceed into our next commission meeting.
Great. Thank you.
Any other questions?
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mike.
Thank you. That was very illuminating.
Madam Clerk, what's our next item?
4B is legislative update on AB 2339, Silva Orgulian.
Good afternoon, President and members of the Commission. My name is Silva Orgulian, and I'm the Community Outreach Associate. I'm here to just give you a very brief update from our last meeting on April 4th regarding AB 2339, regarding net energy metering. At the last meeting, I discussed that the item was in the Assemblymember Gatto's, who is the chairman of the Committee on Utilities and Commerce. Since then, we at GWP forwarded a notice of opposition to the author, which is Assemblymember Jackie Irwin, which I have provided you a copy of the letter that was sent, just for your information. That letter was sent on April 12th. And currently the bill is in the Assembly Appropriations Committee and has not been set for hearing. The bill needs to be set in the next few weeks, and it'll likely go into suspense calendar, and then it'll be taken up at a suspense hearing, which could take place most likely by the end of this month. That's all that I have for you regarding AB 2339, if you have any questions.
I'm assuming that the deficiency in the bill that is problematic for GWP still exists. So it got out of UNC committee with language that is negative.
Yes.
I should say.
Yeah. Okay. Members, any questions?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. 4C is conservation drought update. Michael DeGhetto.
Mr. DeGhetto, welcome.
Thank you, President Hale, members of the Commission. My name is Michael DeGhetto, Assistant General Manager for Water at Glendale Water and Power. And I'm going to give a conservation update today. So our conservation since June has Our cumulative conservation's 21.3%, and in March it went up a lot compared to those winter months. And again, that's because apparently in 2013 we were using a lot more water. So it's definitely, we're still on the 2 days a week, which makes that big difference. So it's 23.5% just on March. And again, we're in that phase 3, 2 days a week, Tuesday and Saturday, no more than 10 minutes at each station. And all the other things remain in effect. And the enforcement activities for March, we sent out, and again, this is from anonymous reports, 3 first warnings, 4 second warnings, and then our enforcement staff sent out warning notices that might lead to a citation, 86 of those. We issued 1 citation, and then the AMI system itself generated for our customer service folks to send out 21 leak letters, make 2 telephone calls, 10 site visits, and then the computer system itself sent out 434 emails that there might be a leak. Water supplies, so the Northern Sierra snowpack is about 95% of normal, Southern 71%, Colorado River is about 97%, and then Lake Mead storage is lower than it was last year. And MWD storage reserves are lower than this time last year, but those are going to start improving because all the member agencies have used a lot less water than was projected under the supply allocation plan, basically because the governor's order and the state's order was more restrictive than that. And then I would direct customers to our website about WaterWise gardening, and then some of the other programs to help save water. And I thought, I changed my last slide this time because I think, going forward now, it's just not a matter of having a brown lawn. It's about thinking about how to use other sorts of plants in your landscaping and just continue to conserve water going forward. And then at my next report, I'll talk a little bit more about statewide because there should be a lot more information coming out and then over the next few weeks about the drought situation and what the state water board's going to do for everyone, and if there'll be any continuing mandatory conservation measures and what those will be.
Okay. Members, any questions?
Just refresh my memory. How long does this mandatory conservation period last? I mean, at what point? Is it just until the state says we're done, or? No,
right now it's till October. So if they didn't do anything, we'd still be in the same conservation mode until October. But the thing that's happening right now is the state taking their final measurements on the snowpack and the water content throughout the state. And then they're going to look at some regional differences as well and come up with either just a long-term conservation mandate, or maybe even talk about, since this is really just related to the drought, maybe lifting it and then coming up with some other sort of, and what I would hope is some thought out and formulaic ways, if something like this comes up in the future, how all the water agencies can deal with that.
So are the utilities going to have a chance to weigh in on what that might look like, or is there any dialogue with the state?
Yeah, there is dialogue, and they've actually requested comment, and through some of the agencies we work with, like CMUA, we've provided comments, and other agencies have provided comments. I think one thing that happens with that, and that's what I meant a little bit about the state's going to try and take a look at some local conditions. Because let's say you're an agency that didn't use water from the Sierra at all, maybe somewhere far in Northern California, and you did have a wet year or had a lot of groundwater. Those agencies have been saying, hey, you need to consider that. You can't just give us a blanket 20% cutback because we're not even affected by any of that. So the state's, I think, going to take a little bit more time and those sorts of comments to look at things.
So in other words, the guidelines need to be more nuanced based on the actual location of the city.
And I think because of the severity of that drought, when I showed those pictures of the governor standing there with no snow, and that really was severe, that really impacted everyone. and there was a very short window for the water board to make its regulations. So they have been soliciting comments.
Okay. Well, I'd be very curious to hear what kind of comments the City of Glendale is providing back to the state. And
it's really in line with what Metropolitan and the other agencies would say, because we're part of a regional system. And so we've invested in storage to manage droughts and to manage dry years as part of that regional system. And that's one of those nuances that the state, being up in Sacramento, doesn't necessarily have a good picture or a good handle on how that works. Because even before the governor issued the order, MWD was going into an allocation, water supply allocation. The governor's order went a little bit past that, which is fine, because that just builds up more of that dry year storage within Met system. But that's the sort of thing that's important, and that, from our perspective, is something that the state needs to consider.
I have a question about these phases. I was wondering, phase 3 is 2 times 10 minutes, and phase 4 is suggested 1 day 15 minutes. So how come we don't go with 2 days 7.5 minutes? From evaporation point of view, my understanding is it could be better 2 times 7.5 minutes rather than 1 time 15 minutes.
I think to answer your question about that, part of this has to do with when the rates were set. And this was a very standard way of putting in conservation measures, mandatory conservation measures. And it would be something, say, going forward, because we have AMI and things like that, when we go through the next cost of service analysis, we might look at adjusting that. But right now, it's really just set this way.
And the reason being is days are easy to enforce and easy to monitor. Time isn't. But Mike is absolutely right. With the sophistication of the meters, if we get down to looking at those meters, we can tell how many minutes you did. So it was kind of set on, if it's 1 day a week and let's say it's Monday. Well, we know if you're watering on Tuesday, you're in violation. But the likelihood that we're going to be able to say we think you watered for 9 minutes and not 7.5 is a little bit harder to enforce. So I think that's kind of the basis for why they did that. But again, our sophistication level is a little bit greater. So if we can get down to that exact time, then maybe that is a better way to go. It's something we wouldn't be opposed to reconsidering. Because, you're right. With the evaporation the way it is, it might be better for the vegetation overall to get it on there 2 times a week versus once. And at the same time, you're saving the same amount of water. So we'll take a look at that as we go forward.
And if I may add, I think I recall from when the ordinance was adopted, it had to do with deep watering of trees. The thought being that at that point in time, you're really not watering your flowers and your grass, but the trees need that sort of at least once a week deep watering to keep them from dying out.
Thank you.
Thanks. Any other questions? Thank you, Mr. DeGhetto. Next item, Madam Clerk.
4D Strategic Plan Update. April Fitzpatrick.
Hello, President Hill, members of the Commission. April Fitzpatrick, Deputy General Manager of GWP. I'm here today to provide you with the quarterly strategic plan update. It's in a scoreboard format, and green meaning ahead of schedule, yellow meaning on target, and goal, red being behind the goal schedule. It's comprised of 6 sections. There's 20 goals and 40 key initiatives that are required to be completed in order to achieve those goals. Can you please pull up? Excuse me. The first category is customer engagement and satisfaction. There are 2 goals in this category. The first one for GWP to consistently remain in the CMUA top 25 municipalities. We have done that and we hope to continue doing that. The second goal is to integrate our business systems to increase customer satisfaction. The second section of strategic goals are organization and structure. There's 4 goals here, and they're predominantly based on developing and ensuring our workforce continues to be top-notch. And the 4th goal here is to always maintain a safe working environment for all staff at all times. The 3rd group of strategic goals are grid operations. There are 5 goals here. The first 2 goals are to limit our outages for electric and water. The 3rd goal here is to reduce unaccounted water, which we're doing well on all of these. And the 4th goal is to reduce technical and non-technical electrical system losses to below 6%. It's 7% now, with the goal being a goal end date of June 2016, and we're cutting it close, but we'll be fine. The 5th goal is to fully automate 35% of our GWP feeders by 2020, and every year we are doing 6. So we're at 13% right now in the most recent quarter that we've reported, and we have till 2020 to complete this goal. The next category is technology and business systems. There are 3 goals in this section. The number 1 priority of these goals is to incorporate security in all of our implementations and to continue improving our technology and business systems. We are yellow in this area. Not a lot has changed since the last time I provided you with the update. The 5th section is power, water, and facilities. There are 3 goals here. The first 2 are yellow. We're right on target, with the 3rd goal stating its complete conceptual plan for 2nd interconnection facility by 2017. It's green because we have gone through and evaluated whether or not this can be done, and it was determined that it's not feasible. The last set of goals are financial performance and business development. The first goal in this section is to ensure that GWP is consistently in the top 25% of the APPA. We've met that goal, and hopefully in the next survey we'll still be in there. Develop the organizational capabilities to support the optimal management of assets and workforce resources. We have till 2019 to complete that goal, and we are evaluating different systems right now, and we'll continue. And the last goal in this section is to identify profitable new business ventures by June 2016. This area is green because we have obtained the approval from our council to install electrical vehicle charging stations level 2s throughout the city, as well as we've just recently completed our fiber plan, and we will be taking it to our council for review in the next few months. In addition to our strategic goals, we also have another way in which we can gauge how well the utility is doing, and we call these key performance indicators. The utility has 60 plus of these that we report every quarter to our council as part of our budget update. And we thought it would be a nice idea here to share with you in graph form a few of those KPIs that we present. The first one is our GWP electric cash reserves. We've been reporting KPIs since 2012. So on this graph, you have 3 years worth of data. With the first year reaching a target goal, the goal is to reach $124 million in our electric fund as a reserve. And the first year we started reporting, we were only at 43%. The second year, we reached 64%. And at the end of fiscal year 2014-15, we reached 79%. And we believe at the end of this current fiscal year, we will reach the target of $124 million. The next slide is the number of water reservoirs inspected and cleaned since we started reporting the KPIs. The first year, we did 3. At the end of fiscal year 13-14, we did 11. And the last full fiscal year, 14-15, we did 8. But we do not anticipate doing any inspections or cleaning this year as a result of the drought and having to empty those reservoirs.
Can I interrupt?
Yes.
Well, thank you for the presentation.
Sure,
by the way.
sure.
These performance indicators, I think these are great because these give more detailed information on, related to your strategic goals. So my question is, you don't have one of these for every single one, right?
No, we don't.
And I think areas where we may need to look at these numbers, it would be good to have something like that for these categories. For instance, right now with the number of reservoirs inspected and cleaned, can you point me to the strategic goal on that one?
They're not connected, Ms. Chair.
They're not connected.
So what you're seeing today is we attempted to give you 3 sets of different types of measures that we use, none of them necessarily related. So you have the very high-level strategic plan in which we set. That's a fairly new plan, as you well know, and that's quite winnowed down from what was the excessive, overburdened, and unuseful former strategic plan. So we made it very streamlined and simple. You're looking at KPIs now, and as April indicated, there's 60 of those. This is citywide. This is not just the utility. The entire city does KPIs of, I don't know what the total number is, and those are reviewed by council on a quarterly basis. So we're giving you a snapshot of ours. These graphs are done for council. So they'll take about 6 of Glendale Water and Power, they'll take about 6 of GPD, they'll take about 6 of Fire Department. So we're sharing those with you because these are on their way. Then the final, when April gets to the final ones, those are the goals that we have each year. Those are my goals. Those are the goals that I establish with the city manager, and my performance is partially based on those. But it gives you a snapshot to show, because I think when you look at the higher level strategic plan, it's just that. It's high level.
It's very high level.
KPIs get into a little bit more nitty gritty. In fact, our KPIs, one of the things that we are striving to do each year is these statistical, I don't want my staff spending or wasting time grinding numbers that have no value. They must have some level of value. For us in the utility, it's a little bit easier because there are so many industry standards that are set either by American Public Power Association, some of the regulatory agencies, AWWA. So for us, it's not as difficult maybe as some others, even though we try to sprinkle in there too what I call the type of statistics that are good for the average consumer to see, and kind of gives you a reflection of what you're doing as a user. And then those final goals, again, are my personal ones. They're the departments, because the entire department has to adopt those. But it's just a little bit different take on it. So we wanted to give you a sense of all 3 of those today in that regard.
The issue that I was seeing was that there are many of these goals, categories are very general. And when I see that it's normal, or yellow is meeting expectations. So when I see meeting expectations, I don't really know what it's meeting because it's so general, and we don't really know how are you stating that it meets expectation? Meets expectation to what? Like what plan are we talking about? Yeah. What's the criteria? What's the plan? What are the...
We have key initiatives that lead up to reach these goals, and they're identified within our strategic plan. And I'll just one moment.
Okay. So they're not presented here.
They're not. This is the update. We can give you... I think you all have a copy of the strategic plan. I hope.
When was the latest one?
The latest one was the one
2015.
We approved it 2015.
And we can make sure we send you an electronic copy.
I know our newest members. I sent it to you as part of your orientation package, but we can send it again.
Yeah, that'd be great. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And then we can just qualify it too. I mean, it's just a matter. Most of these, as I said, are industry standards. So if we're maintaining those industry standards, we feel we're doing really good. And I think you saw a presentation, and I think because, forgive me, I know I've missed a lot of meetings already in the past, but we showed you a report that had been done by SCAPA that had been done about our reliability. That right there, that document, that's as good as it gets there. I mean, for me as an electrical service provider, that is probably one of the most key for our residents and customers. So that's one that we would reference. But it's also one that again, APPA keeps on a regular basis. So we can cross-reference those a little bit more if you'd like. But I think if we use the strategic plan as the main document, again, these were just the updates to what that document and the indicators were, and then we tried to show you some of the KPIs.
Right. Yeah. It's just that when it's formatted in this manner, I just automatically assume that the key performance indicators would tie back to these goals.
Sometimes they do. Sometimes they don't. Yeah. But we can put numbers in there. If you recall, one of the things that everybody at that time had mentioned to me was they liked the red, yellow, and green as indicators of where we were. But we can provide...
You can provide additional information in these cells, kind of like this one. There's one that you have the actual numbers.
We can give you a number.
You could
if it correlates to a number, we could put something in there.
Or a phase,
That's fine.
A milestone. Okay.
Well, actually, Barbara, what we'll do is we'll tie the indicators we have within the strategic plan, and so you see those two. That's easy to do.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Sure. If I could just add, I do think that, so first off, I do appreciate, Ms. Fitzpatrick, the work that you and the team have done here. I do think that the color coding and the sort of dashboard approach gives you a good at-a-glance. At the same time, I think that if you have additional backup material, I don't necessarily think we need to review it here during the course of commission meetings, but perhaps that type of thing could be included as pre-read material in the content that you all forward. You can post it on the website as well for the benefit of local residents and ratepayers. But that would then give you the ability, if you see something that's yellow or or red, certainly, then it gives you the background behind that scoring, right? So that. And then if we review that material in advance, that would give us the ability as commissioners to then bring more thoughtful questions to you for this session.
Okay, sure. The next slide depicts the percentage change in water production and imports. The three lines on this graph indicate a reduction in water imported from MWD as a result of the drought, as well as Verdugo Basin water production and Verdugo Basin average per well. This next slide compares revenues and expenses per kilowatt hour sold for last fiscal year. The burgundy color represents our expenses are roughly 15 cents per kWh. And with our residential, commercial, and industrial customers on average, it's also 15%. But this current fiscal year, we anticipate it being closer to 17.5 cents. The next slide is electrical outages and system average interruption duration index in minutes. For those 3 years that we have been tracking this information, year one, we had 48 outages with an average duration of 39 minutes. Year two, we had 65 outages with a duration at 41 minutes on average. And at the end of 14-15 fiscal year, we had 46 outages with a 34-minute duration. Another comparison on our interruption duration index is also comparing ourselves to the investor-owned utility. And as you can see on the bottom of the graph, our goal is less than 40 minutes, whereas the investor-owned utilities on average are closer to 2 hours. And that is the last graph I was going to share with you with regards to KPIs. This next and last section is to share with you our departmental goals. And again, these are developed by our GM, Mr. Zern, and our city manager, Mr. Ochoa. This slide here are the 7 strategic goals that we have either completed this fiscal year or will complete by June 30th of this fiscal year. A couple of them being to complete the upgrade conversion of 6 feeders from 4 kV to 12 kV. This is one that is in our strategic goal, as you recall, to reach 35% by 2020. If we continue doing 6 per year, we will definitely achieve that goal. Another strategic goal here, departmental goal, is to implement customer mobile access to data account. We've rolled out that mobile app where you can pay your utility bill and look at your usage on your smartphone, and we have over 3,000 people signed up right now. As well as we've just recently completed our fiber business plan that we anticipate taking to our council in the next couple of months.
And just to note, all the last 5 bullets are all part of the strategic plan. So those all loop back to the strategic plan. Whether it's modernization, grid modernization, it's Grayson specific, it's Grandview's part of grid modernization, the fiber optics plan.
And again, the 16-17 goals that have just recently been established were determined by Mr. Zern and Mr. Ochoa, and there are 9 for next year. And the first one is to initiate and complete the development, installation, and commissioning of a 2-megawatt battery storage project, and that's going to be located at the Grandview substation. Utilizing the results of a water system master plan and develop a 10-year capital improvement program and a proposed funding plan to go with it. Again, those feeders to continue the 4 kV to the 12 kV. Initiate and complete a new electric COSA, as well as a water COSA.
What is a COSA?
Cost of service
analysis.
Thank you.
On the water side of our business, there will be an emphasis that we'll be looking at tier level review, recycled water rates, drought rates, and energy cost allocation. And on the electric division, we'll be incorporating our distributed energy resource, such as net energy metering, time of use, and electric vehicle rate schedules. In addition, we'll be initiating completing the consolidation of our citywide warehouse operations, where fire and public works will be under the umbrella of GWP and will manage all of the warehouse functions and storage. Another goal is to complete a risk assessment in the power supply division, developing a risk tolerance, a hedge plan, and long-term risk management oversight for the operation. Also to complete a water storage assessment and develop operational plan policy for future storage. And lastly, those 4 electrical vehicle charging stations, which will be installed throughout the city in the next few months. That concludes my presentation. Do you have any questions?
Since a question came up on the COSA, so our current rate structure in both water and electric will have its final year 2018. So it'll be year 4 of 4 for water, year 4 of 4 for water, and 5 of 5 for electric. So the cost of service analysis is required by law for us to be able to move forward with a new rate structure. So that cost of service analysis is conducted, then you'll have from that a pro forma. You set the pro forma, you set your rates, and so we're just getting a head start on that. That has taken us usually about a year. So putting it out there a little bit early and getting it done a year early, especially since we have Grayson that's coming up, and we don't see how that impacts rates. As you saw in the water, you had asked about the conservation. That's an opportunity for us to relook at that and see how that plays out. And then we've got the net energy metering, electric vehicles, some of the newer distributed generation issues on electric that we want to make sure that we incorporate those into as well. So that's why those two are on the plan for next year.
How many electric vehicle charging stations are being installed in total? I saw that there are 4 for the next year, but...
Approximately 10 is what we have approval for now.
Okay. Are any of them on city property, or are they on...
A lot of them will be on city property. So we have now, over in the lot behind City Hall, the Isabel lot, we have a quick charge station, the only quick charge station we have in the city. We have one in the Civic Center garage, and then we're going to put them at the transportation center. We want to put one on the street in both downtown and downtown Montrose. So along Brand and one up in Montrose. Demand in Montrose is there. We know that because we've seen at least a couple of cars that have an extension cord and plug right into the electrical outlet in the parkway. So we know there's some demand up there, and we want to get folks a charger. So we're looking at both street chargers and some of our parking structures. We're going to put 2 more in the Civic Center parking structure. So we're going to put one for our own vehicles and one for the public, because we've begun to, I'm not sure you're aware, but we now have 4 electric vehicles in water and power that we're going to have our staff, we've wrapped them. So we've put the big wrapping advertisement on them, and we're going to have staff use those as they go around and meet customers and talk to customers. So we're kind of a rolling billboard, but it's an all-electric vehicle. So those are some of the locations we have pegged right now. Keep looking at what we'd like to do is encourage, and we've done this through our website, is to encourage folks who own electric vehicles, tell us where you work within Glendale and where you live, or where you go for your entertainment, and that's what we'll start targeting. We're seeing, just based on DMV records, that sales in Glendale are going up. We just like to know where those are at, and if you give us your input, we'd certainly start to look at putting those in places where there's a greater demand. So,
we're not charging.
Yeah,
right?
we charge.
We are charging.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
How do we charge?
What's the rate structure?
Credit card. So the rate structure right now, we have a very simplistic one. That's why we have a consultant right now looking at a more sophisticated rate structure for that. So the quick charge is a little bit more than the slow charge. So by virtue of just what you're getting. So we want to kind of get those narrowed down so that it's a little bit more in line with the market. And we have to look at it. I mentioned the cost of service analysis, and I think everybody's aware one of the reasons that's required by law is we cannot charge any one customer. One customer class cannot subsidize any other customer class. So we have to make sure even our EV users are paying their full freight on the cost.
So none of them is private?
Oh, I think there's private chargers in the city. I'm not sure where. We have the one in the Civic Center right now is through another company, and you just slide your card on that one. But the rest of these going in will be ours. And again, you'll still use your credit card on them. And for now, as we get them coming online until we get the new rate structure in place, we'll go with the very basic rate structure we established, I think, in our last rate upgrade 3 years ago.
So comment and a suggestion. So comment first for Ms. Fitzpatrick and you, Mr. Zern, and the staff. I think the strategic plan speaks to very high performance within the Glendale Department, Water and Power. So I think that's very commendable. I think the comment / question is really for you, Mr. Zern, which is, and perhaps for this commission, which is, as we look at the 2016, 2017 strategic initiatives that you have in place, which among those might we consider addressing in this forum? I was going to hold that comment until we got to the agenda forecast, but while we're on the topic, I mean, there's some great work that you have going here. Certainly, the COSA is also very important on a variety of levels. So that's what I would suggest when we get to that agenda forecast is consider whether any of those strategic initiatives really lend themselves as to being topics for future meetings. But thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mike.
Yes.
Sorry, I've got hay fever, and I was trying not to sneeze into the mic. Regarding the cash reserves, I see nice growth here over the last 3 fiscal years to reach this mark. So this $124 million is suggested by the city council to have on reserve, but that's not for. Is that for capital expenditures, or that's
the council's policy to have unrestricted reserves is $124 million. In the last rate structure we did, we settled down on that, and that's council's prerogative, to $110 million, and that was in an attempt to try to keep the rate structure a little bit more reasonable, because we did, especially in those first 3 years, have pretty high increases. As it's turned out, because of just us cutting costs, sales being up, that we're going to far exceed that even $124 million number. So the other thing we've done is we went out, because at that time we had promised council we'd go out and have a review done of our reserve policy in relation to really what the bonding agencies look at, the financial institutions look at, what our other fellow utilities have online, and kind of come up with something that, you know, what's reasonable? Is what we have reasonable, or is there another number? And it really does come down to what the council feels most comfortable with. You know, I think at this point in time on the electric side, ours is a little bit higher because just of the uncertainty in the age of Grayson. You know, if we were to get a new Grayson, would we still be looking at that? You know, we'll see. We don't have as much catastrophic issues with that particular facility being brand new and upgraded. But you still have things like, you know, they like 3 months. You want 3 months of operating expenses in the bank. You want 6 months of operating expenses in the bank. So those are all kind of things just to discuss. So we're really proud of that, having crawled out from where we were and gotten back. And I think even the bigger issue is we didn't show it here because I think it's common knowledge that we were in very, very bad shape with regards to the water operation, which was at $1.22 million in the hole. So my hope is that on June 30th of this year, we will break the surface of the water and begin our crawl back up to the positive. So that's also a tremendous accomplishment by.
But just so I understand, this is not going to be allocated for capital projects. This is a cash reserve for basically for emergencies, operational.
So it can be for a variety of things. It could very well be for PAYGO capital. So we could decide that the council could decide to draw down on that for PAYGO capital as opposed to, say, issuing debt or a bond. So we could do that. So again, that factors into it. How much are you willing to draw down on that reserve, and what level do you want to keep? Then what are your rate structure going to look like to replenish that reserve? So those are all questions that really come through the COSA and the pro forma, and then the rate structure when you get to it. So a lot of times they'll put it as, you know, here's what you need to keep for operating reserves, here's what you need to keep for emergencies, and here's what you need to keep for. Sometimes what they'll say is they call it a rate stabilization, but that's really a misnomer. So they split those into 3 different categories, but those are the things that we'll talk about. Do we want to go PAYGO capital, half PAYGO capital, maybe issue a smaller amount of debt? I don't know.
Okay.
All good questions, though.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. Next item.
Okay, 5 is oral communications. Discussion is limited to items not part of this agenda. Each speaker is allowed 5 minutes or 3 minutes. Commission may question or respond to the speaker, but there will be no debate or decision. The general manager may refer the matter to appropriate staff for investigation and report.
Madam Clerk, I do not have any cards. Do you have any cards at the desk?
6 is agenda forecast.
Okay, thank you. So, members, I have a number of ideas I'd like to throw out there, but I want to open it up for all of you to make any suggestions for our next couple of meetings. Mr. Camargo?
Sure, yes. So I guess doubling back on the 2016-2017 strategic initiatives, you know, COSA might be an example. I don't know that we're going to go through all of it. We don't need to go through all the strategic initiatives, but, you know, how would we, I mean, my question really for this commission and perhaps for Mr. Zern is how can we really prioritize those? Maybe there's 2 or 3 that we ought to take a look at from this commission's perspective.
And I guess by that you mean just to come back to you so you get a presentation on them?
Yeah, especially if you're considering options on something that you need to go to the city council for, then it would be seems to me it would be appropriate for this commission to provide you with advice to council on which of those, how to prioritize those options.
So let me just say, you mentioned the COSAs. So the two COSAs will get to you eventually. It'll get to you in the form of a rate structure. That's how we'll get to you on that. We'll bring to you what the proposed rate structure is for that next 5 years. But that probably won't be until probably 18. So that's not something you're going to see anytime soon in the interim. In the meantime, if we just want to go down that list real quick, I anticipate coming back to you with the water system master plan and a 10-year capital plan that goes with it. So this is a very, very complex document, comprehensive document that we haven't quite seen the likes of, at least in, well, not that I've been in water and power all that long, but that anybody can remember. And then a funding plan that goes with it. So this is a really interesting one. That we would plan on bringing back. The COSAs I mentioned. The complete or are completing the risk assessment with the power supply division. We'd come back and give you a report on that. Yeah. So you can take a look at that and see what the proposal was for the hedge policy, the risk assessment analysis, and the results of that. And then the water storage assessment as well. I think you'd be interested in that. So we're doing a comprehensive evaluation of our water storage and whether or not we are keeping too much water, not enough water. I think it's probably more the latter, or the former, excuse me. But we'll give you what the strategy is, what we found with regards to the amount of water, days kept, some of the implications of that, and then look at what our strategy is going to be going forward. So those I anticipate right off the top of my head, which is most of the list if you throw the COSAs in there too.
Yeah, that's pretty close to what I had jotted down.
Those are all going to be coming back to you at one point or another, mostly for a presentation. Again, as I said, the COSAs you'll get kind of as a attachment, if you will, to the rate proposal. Assuming there is, I'm not going to make an assumption that we're absolutely going to have a rate proposal, but assuming there is, that's when you'd take a look at that. But the others will be there. And then the battery storage project will be cutting the ribbon, and you'll be invited to come help us do that. So that's a big project that's already underway, and we just want to make sure we complete that. The 2 megawatt, our kicking the tires of battery storage.
Back to the Aliso Canyon impact on the electric reliability system we talked about earlier, and I think you mentioned you want to send us the report?
I will send you an overview of that, which is the programs we're undertaking, and then it'll be a high-level look at, because there's been no definitive decision made on rotating outages if, in fact, the curtailments occur. So that information is awfully sensitive at this point, so that's not something I'm going to release in any kind of detail at this point because it's just not ready. But to show you, here's our plan. So if you're interested, for instance, we do it at the substation level. We do it for 2 hour increments and then rotate off to someplace else. Okay. So that gives you kind of an idea of what you might expect if we get to that curtailment. If it's a 2 hour or less incident, hey, we're good. We're lucky. If it's a 6 hour incident, we'll be rotating off 3 times as we try to spread out the pain, if you will, of what this curtailment. And then, it'll go by how much curtailment has there been. Does it cause us to shed 10% of our load, 20% of our load, 30% of our load? So I can give you a very brief or higher profile overview of that.
I think that sounds great. And besides that, if other commissioners agree, I would like to request an update every month in the summer.
Sure.
Yeah, which would be easy for you to do, I think.
We've got a couple potential summer holidays, but we'll do it either via email or as a report at the meeting. Okay. Either or both.
Right.
Yeah, so I think having that high-level overview of the likely outcome of supply curtailments on the gas side at our next meeting is probably a good idea. I'd also like to get a presentation on demand response, what efficiency opportunities are out there, because there's 3 ways you shed load. You just cut customers off and just shut down the generating stations. You rely on behavioral changes, or you make investments in permanent reductions in demand. So what investments, I'd like to get an overview of what investments we're making in those permanent reductions in demand, and then sort of the customer-focused behavioral things that people can do.
And we've got some programs we've been I think we're going into our third summer of those that on the behavioral side, and some of the demand response more brick and mortar type are still in development stages, but we can talk a little bit about those.
Great.
So I understand that there have been discussions at some of the other municipal utilities about increasing their proportion of renewable energy beyond the state mandated goals. I was curious as to whether that's a discussion that's happening within GWP at all.
Well, I'll tell you what. Being is that we have the state mandated goal is 50%. That's what I'm shooting for right now because we aren't there. So for me to start looking beyond that, I get a little bit concerned. So we're moving incrementally towards that, and we certainly aren't going to be held to 50%. If we can go 60, we'll go 60. If we can go 70, we can go 70. We're going to keep looking for the best deals and opportunities we can. But in the short term, getting to that to the 350 requirements of 50% is where we'll be headed. And we're doing really well right now, so that gives us the opportunity to kind of work from a position of, I would say, power. So we're not scrambling to try to make the original 33%, and we're doing very well in that regard. So that gives us a little bit of flexibility as we look towards the 50 and then beyond. And a lot of those will be long-term contracts, so you can see those things stretch and go beyond that. One thing that's interesting though is a lot of the intermittent power we're dealing with relies on gas for smoothing.
Exactly.
So you find yourself in sort of a dilemma there.
Right.
So a lot of folks will say, "Boy, I told you we should have had more solar and wind," and we're saying you got to smooth that. You got to smooth that somehow. Now that could be smoothed outside the state of California, I guess, but then you got a transmission issue. All of those challenges that we face, but certainly ones that we'll continue to look at. But by no means are we going to be held to 50%, but at this point in time, that's what I'm trying to strive to get, and then from there we'll just keep moving if we can.
Right.
So, Commissioners, I have an update on potential gas curtailments for our next meeting, demand response, as well as demand response, in addition to the items that we've already got on there. I would target the cost of service analysis, a quick update on the cost of service analysis, EVs, and the fiber business plan for our August meeting, just as placeholders for the moment, and we can sit down and discuss the timing on those.
I'm sorry, sir, for which meeting?
August 1st.
Okay.
And then once we get to our next meeting, we can update the forecast based on where we're at with the development of those.
So, question regarding timing on that. It was mentioned earlier that the fiber optics plan is going to the City Council sometime soon. When is that going to Council?
We haven't set a date yet.
Okay. So is August soon enough for this commission to address that topic?
If anything changes, I'll let you know. So I think it is. I think the timing will work.
Good.
The fiber really is a 2-year rollout plan. So it'll take us probably the better part of this fiscal year, this coming fiscal year, 16-17, and that'll help our IS department to set the foundation and get into One Wilshire and tie that all up and have their maintenance. And then once they do that, the following year, 17-18, we can roll the plan out.
So I'd just like to add those to the August meeting as placeholders for the moment, and then we can revisit those when we get to our next meeting, depending on where we're at and where you think we're. Okay. Anything else, members?
Well, while we're talking about timing, I think we went through about 4 different programs, the key initiatives that we thought would be appropriate to address, but we did not address the timing for those. Was that something can you speak to that now, or would you prefer to take some time and work with staff and come back with a proposed schedule for when we address those topics here?
When we present them to you?
Yes. So we can add
we would
the
do
agenda.
that quarterly. So the strategic plan comes back for an update quarterly. We could just roll the KPIs into that as well. Is that your question?
That wasn't the intent behind my question. So it's one thing, I think, to report on the status of a project, or in this case, a key. I guess you call them
key performance indicators.
It was beyond the key performance indicators. It was under the category of 2016-17 strategic goals.
My goals, yes.
Okay, so for your goals,
yes,
there were 4 different programs that we talked about.
Correct.
So are you suggesting then that we address those when we come back for the quarterly updates on the strategic plan, or do we add them to the agenda for October or November so that we can start to tick these off and look at the risk assessment for power supply?
Yes. Yes. No. Now I understand what you're saying. Yes, we would individually probably put those on a particular meeting month. So just as you said, I'm not ready to do that. We'll go back and take a look and see how everything's rolling out. But absolutely, October meeting would be the water capital system.
Okay.
November meeting would be the risk management, risk assessment report. So we would put them individually, not make them part of the KPIs.
Right.
Yeah. We'll just kind of go over the KPI strategic plan updates. It's going to be more brief, higher level.
Yeah.
Those that I was speaking of are going to come back in detail, and those will be a specific separate budget or agenda item, and they'll come back to you for a presentation.
Okay, excellent.
So
appreciate that.
I'll speak for myself, but I'm sure that a few of us share the opinion. We really like your strategic goals, and we'd like to hear more about them. So
I have the coolest strategic goals.
They're very fun. They're some really.
I hear that a lot, actually.
And interesting proposals that you're working on, and we'd like to bring them into this forum so that we can air them out, have a conversation about them, and hopefully provide some oversight and guidance.
Perfect. And that's kind of the intent of those. They become much more tangible as far as they're 1 year, the entire staff buys off on them. That's what I said. They'll buy off on those. And they're all like, but they're also important and transparent with regards to the public as far as some of the key goals that we have and that are pushing forward the utility in a lot of different ways. And we hope that most of those goals are of interest, because at the end of the day, it's going to impact the ratepayer. Want to make sure they're included in that and know that as well. So yes, definitely will. Most of those, as I said, it looks like on that list, with maybe the exception of the warehouse consolidation. And we can certainly, as we install a new charging station, send you a note and say we got a brand new one. We usually make a kind of a big blast out of it in a press release. We'll make sure we send that to you and say where the newest 1, 2, or 4 of those are. 4 is what we have on the goals for next year, but Mr. Keenan assures me we could probably even do more than that, so that'll be great.
Great. Okay. Madam Clerk, next item, unless there are any other comments, members? Next item.
7, adjournment.
Without objection, can we get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Without objection, we are adjourned.